of MS-13.
Will you give Mr. Abrego Garcia the due process that the Supreme Court and Judge Wilkinson has required you to give him?
Abrego Garcia is an El Salvador resident who is in his home country. If he were to come back to this country, he would be immediately removed again.
How do you know?
He has received and been treated appropriately,
So
sir, and he is not.
How can you say he's been treated appropriately if the Supreme Court has ruled 9-0? 9-0 that he hasn't been treated appropriately. Why is your opinion better and have more authority than the Supreme Court?
Dan Goldman confronts Christy Noem for refusing to follow a unanimous Supreme Court ruling. He reminds her that accusations aren't due process and demands she obey the court. She won't commit, revealing a dangerous belief that executive power outranks the Constitution.
Back to Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia's case, Madam Secretary. But my first question for you is a pretty simple one. It's basic civics. Which branch of government does the Constitution give the authority to interpret what the law is? The judiciary or the executive branch?
Sir, going forward, the interpretation of the law, you make the laws in this body. The judicial branch makes sure that they have integrity and they're applied properly to individuals.
So I'm just going to take that as the judiciary branch. Now, let's focus for a second on what the judiciary branch has said about this case. We know the Supreme Court has said 9-0 that notwithstanding your statements under oath here today that Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was afforded due process, he was in fact not afforded due process, because then if he were, you would have seen the withholding order that did not permit him to be deported to El Salvador. Now you allege, and I guess the Attorney General alleges, that he's a member of MS-13. That may very well be the case. And if he is, now that is a foreign terrorist organization, certainly the immigration laws would allow him and in fact require him to be deported. I certainly would support that. But the problem that we have here is what you allege, what Ms. Green alleges, what the Attorney General alleges, is not the judiciary. You don't get to decide whether or not he is an MS-13 member. And you don't have to take my word for it, because Judge Wilkinson, a Fourth Circuit judge, very conservative, addressed this argument. He said, the government asserts that Abrego Garcia is a terrorist and a member of MS-13. Perhaps, but perhaps not. Regardless, he is still entitled to due process. If the government is confident in its position, it should be assured that position will prevail in proceedings to terminate the withholding of removal order. Will you commit right now to give Mr. Abrego Garcia that process where you can prove your allegation that he is a member of MS-13?
Congressman, that judge that you just quoted did not say he was not a member of MS-13. Who did say that he was a member of MS-13 was law enforcement officers that encountered this individual.
Yeah, he knows that. This is a Fourth Circuit judge. He knows all of what the evidence is, and he's saying if that evidence. So you're not going to commit to follow this order. You won't commit to follow this court order.
By the way, he identified
Madam Secretary,
himself.
I reclaim my time. Stop filibustering. Stop filibustering.
By gang members of MS-13.
Will you give Mr. Abrego Garcia the due process that the Supreme Court and Judge Wilkinson has required you to give him?
Abrego Garcia is an El Salvador resident who is in his home country. If he were to come back to this country, he would be immediately removed again.
How do you know?
He has received and been treated appropriately,
sir,
and he is not.
How can you say he's been treated appropriately if the Supreme Court has ruled 9-0? 9-0 that he hasn't been treated appropriately? Why is your opinion better and have more authority than the Supreme Court?
Investigators, 2 judges, an immigration court that all said he was MS-13 and was removed from this country.
But you understand, that is you saying that. That is you saying that.
That is them saying that. This
No,
is
no, no, no.
investigators and law
That is
enforcement
you
officers
making that
in the case they
determination.
built against him. If you don't
The
trust our law
court
enforcement
has
officers
considered all that.
and
The judge has
investigators,
considered all that,
then
Madam
who do you
Secretary.
trust if you
And
don't
if you would
trust
be
judges?
quiet, because I'm reclaiming my time, you are not following this court order. But let's focus on the court order, because this opinion also says that to facilitate, which the Supreme Court is requiring, is an active verb. It requires that steps be taken. What steps have you taken to return Mr. Abrego Garcia to allow him to get due process?
Abrego Garcia is in his home country.
What
If he were to come
steps
back,
have
your
you
advocacy-
taken?
If your continued advocacy for him were to...
I'm not advocating for him.
Yes, you
I'm
are.
advocating for a
Absolutely.
court order, Madam
Gone to the
Secretary.
mat for this
The
man
court
who
order
has terrorized
says
people
that
in
you
traffic
must take
with human
steps
beings.
to follow the court order. You are here under oath. What steps have you taken to return Mr. Abrego Garcia pursuant to this court order?
It's got to be extremely discouraging to be one of your constituents. To see you fight for a terrorist like this and not fight for them is extremely alarming to me.
I'm fighting for due process, and that's under the Constitution.
Gentleman's
and you
time
should
has
fight too for
expired.
due process.
The gentleman's time has expired. I now
What you just saw wasn't just a heated exchange in a crowded hearing room. It was a full-blown constitutional stress test playing out in real time. Don Goldman wasn't grandstanding, and he wasn't focused on defending any one individual. What he was defending loudly, clearly, and repeatedly was the one thing that keeps every administration, every agency, and every official in check: the rule of law. He begins by establishing something so basic it shouldn't even be controversial. In the United States, the executive branch does not interpret the law. Agencies do not interpret the law. The judiciary does. And when the Supreme Court unanimously rules that the government failed to follow the law in the case of Kilmer Abrego Garcia, that is supposed to be the end of the argument. 920 is not a gray area. It is not partisan. It is not open to reinterpretation. It is the Constitution speaking with one voice. But instead of acknowledging that, the Secretary pivots to something entirely different: accusations. She talks about labels, associations, what her department believes, and what risks they think Garcia poses. And Goldman slams the brakes on that immediately, because accusations are not due process. Executive opinions are not due process. If the government truly believes its evidence is strong, then the courtroom, not political rhetoric, swear it should be presented. Goldman strengthens his point by citing Judge Wilkinson, a conservative judge with no ideological reason to side against the administration. Wilkinson made the same warning. Even if all allegations were true, the government still cannot skip the constitutional process. That's not a technicality. That's the entire foundation of American law. And that's the moment the hearing shifts from tense to deeply troubling. Goldman asks the simplest question any constitutional officer should answer without hesitation. Will you follow the Supreme Court's ruling? Instead of saying yes, she refuses. He asks again. She sidesteps again. He presses a third time. She still won't commit. And then comes the most dangerous rhetorical turn. She frames his defense of due process as defending a terrorist. This is exactly the type of logic the Constitution was written to prevent. The government cannot declare someone dangerous, skip the legal process, and call it justice. If that were acceptable, no rights would be safe. Goldman's final question is the one that exposes everything. What steps have you taken to comply with the Supreme Court ruling? Because a unanimous decision requires action. It requires correction. It requires the government to fix what it did wrong, and she still won't answer. Instead, she pivots into political talking points about Goldman's district, avoiding the legal obligation entirely. That's why this moment matters. It shows how quickly the rule of law can erode, not through dramatic coups or big legislative battles, but through quiet refusals, vague evasions. And officials deciding their judgment outweighs the highest court in the country. Goldman is not defending Kilmer Abrego Garcia as a person.